Sometimes things just don't go right. Whether it's Visual Studio crashes or there's seemingly a bug somewhere or something's just not working the way you expect it to, you have to figure out a way to diagnose and hopefully fix issues with Visual Studio. And I actually have one of these issues right now. So I'm going to walk you through the process of how I think through addressing and identifying issues in Visual Studio. Now, it does not mean that I'm going to fix the issue on camera today. In fact, I've kind of looked through it. I'm not sure if I have a fix for it. I'm going to reach out to some people and get some more help, and that's one of the steps we'll talk about. But we're going to walk through my process and some of the easy things you can do first before you just go, hey, I've got a problem. Oh no, what do I do? Okay, so that's what I do in this video. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. And one of the ways I do that is through practical, hands-on stuff, real-world things that you're going to encounter, like problems in Visual Studio. So let's get started today by looking at my copy of Visual Studio. And here I am, I'm looking over the TIMCO Retail Manager project. What actually prompted this was I was getting ready to record a TIMCO video. Now, if you aren't familiar with the TIMCO series, I have, over the past about 2.5 years, have been recording a series on YouTube first, where we go through and build a real-world application. And this application here is getting kind of complex. We've got an API that's running, that's powering both a WPF project and a Blazor WebAssembly project. And all of that creates some more complicated interactions with Visual Studio, like you would get in the real world. Now, when I went to test this project, it didn't work. I'm going to show you what happened. So I'm going to run just my Portal project, which is my Blazor WebAssembly project. Now I've got Portal up here. I'm going to run IIS Express. And when I do, instead of launching, I get this unable to connect to web server IIS Express. And this is not what I was getting just a little bit ago. So we're going to figure out and walk through what's going on and how we might be able to identify what this issue is. Now, the very first thing that I would do is, and I did do, is restart Visual Studio, just in case there's any issues where maybe something didn't quite load right. You restart Visual Studio and try again. I've already done that. The next step that I would do is actually to launch Visual Studio as administrator, just in case there's some kind of configuration that has to happen that isn't happening because I don't have administrative rights. So you right click on the icon and say launch as administrator. That didn't work either, but I want to let you know that those are the first two steps that I would do. Now, this error right here looks like it's an error in Visual Studio itself. So the next thing I want to do is look at the application event log. So to do that, you can go to your control panel here and you can type event log and see your event logs. And in here in the Windows event log, look for application and see if you have any red exclamation points. Take a little bit to load, but once it does, notice IIS Express. That we're gonna zoom in here because it's a little small, but there is an error that says the worker process failed to initialize correctly and therefore could not be started. The data is the error, which is great. There's the error right there. Got it? 020000780, which actually may be useful. And we're going to look at, see if we can't make that, look that up on the internet. But that's one piece of information. But right before there, we also have another error that says the same thing or similar. It says let's zoom in here. The worker process for app pool, Portal app pool, which is a process ID of 3596, failed to initialize the http.sys communication when asked to start processing HTTP requests, and therefore was considered ill by W3SVC and terminated. It's considered ill. Yep, it's broke. So the data field contains the error number, which the data field has, again, that 020000780. Seems significant. Now, there's not a lot of information to go on, except for the fact that now I know a couple of keywords to Google. So let's bring Google up here real quick. Actually, I use Bing, but it's up to you which you want to use. And so I'm just going to Google IS Express, one word, even though it's technically two, it often comes up as one word in the searches. Error, and then 020000780. And we have this IS Express failed to start for ASP.NET Core Edge. And we'll find out more information. Edge case. All right. So there is information on here about IS Express and why it's not working. And if we look down here, it says we then manually execute because before they've already got one running in the command tray. Well, guess what? I don't have one already running. So this isn't going to solve the problem. If you scroll down the bottom here, it's probably going to say, if you hit the same thing, you know what to look for. The solution is to stop the process launched by Visual Studio. Well, guess what? I don't have one launched by Visual Studio. So that's not the solution. But you kind of work through this list and you're going to find a lot of false starts, a lot of errors in here, a lot of things that don't apply to you, but they may give you some good advice as well. You have to try it and find out, okay? So that's one step I take on the process. I look at my application event log. I see if I have an error. I read the different ones just in case there's different errors in here. In fact, this is a repeat of that same error. Therefore, it's nothing new here, but this might be helpful, okay? So that's the place that I start. Now, since I didn't find a solution here, let's clear this out. We'll minimize this for now. I'll come back to this in a minute. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to start some diagnostic tests of our own. Because if we don't find a ready solution on the internet, it may be time to start doing some steps of our own to try and see if maybe it's just something quirky with our project. There's nothing worse than trying to share a problem on the internet only to find out that no one else seems to have it. And people get frustrated. They're like, man, it seems like nobody else has this problem. Well, maybe it's because the problem is unique to your machine or unique to your circumstances. If that's the case, you can probably figure out if that's the case by trying a few diagnostic steps. For one, what we can do is open your solution, right click, and say Open Folder in File Explorer. And in here, what we can do is you can see this hidden folder. Now, I have shown hidden folders, but if you don't have hidden folders shown, then what you can do is go to View, and then there is this Hidden Items checkbox. Make sure that's checked, and you'll see a .vs, also a .git. Do not touch the .git folder, but with .vs, we can delete that, but not quite yet. We need to close out of Visual Studio. All right, now we can right-click on .vs. We can say delete. That's okay. What's going to happen is it's going to forget all of our personal settings about that project in Visual Studio. Not all of our Visual Studio settings, just for that project. Things like which app is the startup app. That's the big one in that folder. We want to get rid of that, clean that, flush it out. The other thing we want to do while we're here and while Visual Studio is shut down is you want to go to every project, select the bin and the OBJ folder, and delete them. Let's go back, go to the next project. The bin and the OBJ folder, delete it. Now, why are we deleting these folders? Well, these are created by Visual Studio whenever we build our project. By deleting them, we're getting rid of any kind of leftover information from the last build. So this is just one more good cleanup step that will ensure we get a full, fresh build the next time we try this, just in case it's a build issue. Now, I don't think in my case it is, but we're going to try this just to go through the entire process step by step by step. You want to make sure you don't skip steps and assume that something is working that maybe isn't actually working. All right, so now you have those cleaned up. We don't want to delete .git. We don't want to delete any other folders, just the bin and OBJ folders and that .vs folder. All right, now you want to launch our Visual Studio again. It's going to load all the projects. It may take some extra time this time because it's got to rebuild some things. So notice it's verifying, restoring, doing a lot of things in the background. And now notice it's not even on the correct project. It's on TRM Desktop Library. I want to choose the portal and IIS Express to run this. Gonna launch it again and see if this time it launches. It's gonna do a full build now, but nope, it's unable to connect to web server IIS Express. Okay, next step in the process, I'm gonna go to my Tools menu and get Tools and Features. I thought it's the quickest way to get to this menu. And this is where we install or reinstall or modify our Visual Studio. Now, I could do an uninstall and reinstall, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do instead is I'm going to close this out. We can see I have my installations of Visual Studio. I actually have 3 different installations, the build tools from 2017, and then I have Community Edition 2019, that's what I'm using right now. I also have Enterprise 2019 Preview. So for both of these, if I had an update, that would be listed here. It would allow us to update Visual Studio. Always do that first. Make sure Visual Studio is on the latest version. Now, I'm already on the latest version, which may be the cause of this issue. I'm not sure. So I'm on version 16.10.1. So what we can do is we can notice this is the middle item here. There's this More button. And if we click the More button, there is a repair option. Now, what this repair is going to do is it's going to fix your installation of Visual Studio. It's going to try and reinstall and reset up your Visual Studio, check all your DLLs and things like that. And it's also going to reset your profile back to the beginning, which means if you have any settings where you've not logged into Visual Studio or not saved your settings in Visual Studio, then it may lose those. It will lose those. But if you do a repair, this is the next kind of big step, but it's a next step to just make sure that your Visual Studio is running properly. If you have a problem, do a repair. Now, I've already done that. I don't want to do it on camera again, but that's the next step after you update Visual Studio and it still doesn't work. Do a repair. Now, after that, what we can do is we can close out of the solution and we can say New Project. And let's choose a Blazor WebAssembly since it's the same structure. So let's choose Blazor WebAssembly app, hit next. And let's call it Web App 5, it's fine. And we want the .NET 5 and HTTPS no authentication. We're not going to have it core hosted or a progressive web app. Well, let's do progressive web application just because that's what I currently have in my project. I'm trying to mirror it as closely as possible. And what this step is going to do is it's going to make sure it's not a project issue, but instead it's a Visual Studio issue. Because if it works here, but not my other project, then it's a project issue, not a Visual Studio issue. So let's launch without changing anything else. No changes. Let's launch IIS Express. It's going to do a build. It's going to bring all our stuff in and unable to connect to web server IIS Express. So it's not a project issue. Now, if you do happen to have another version of Visual Studio installed on your computer, for example, I have the Preview Edition. So let's go to New Project. This is the Preview Edition, which has, the latest bits that may be a little bit cutting edge, but that's okay. Whoops. I want Blazor WebAssembly app. Same thing, call it 6 this time, 5, none, and PWA. We're gonna create in this other version of Visual Studio, just in case it's the launch process that's causing the problem. So now in the latest version of Visual Studio, we're going to run this again. Again, no changes, just launch this as is. So it's succeeded in the build and it can't connect to web server IIS Express. Now we're getting close to the place where we know at least where the error is, if not how to fix it. So we've seen how to update Visual Studio. We've seen how to repair Visual Studio. We've seen how to try a different project in Visual Studio. We've seen how to clean out our project in Visual Studio, but it seems like Visual Studio isn't even really the issue. But those other steps will help you if the issue was in Visual Studio. Those are some good things to try. And you can mix and match the order as it makes sense. Obviously, the more detailed or in-depth things like repairing Visual Studio itself are things you probably don't want to do as a first step, more as a last step. But all good to check out. Now, in our case, it's with IIS Express itself, probably. So what we can do is we can look at the installation of IIS Express, which normally comes right from Visual Studio, but there is an entry for it for doing a repair. So let's go to our installed applications. But I want to show you something interesting here. And if we go to the apps and features, if we look in this list, we're not going to find, well, we find IIS Express right here, but we can't modify it, okay? But this isn't the only place to find installed things. This is a little frustrating with Windows, currently Windows 10, but this is not the only place to find programs that are installed. You can go down here where it says Programs and Features, or what you can do is you can open back up the control panel. I say back here, and we have Programs, Uninstall a Program. So click Uninstall a Program, and it will list all of your programs for you. And if you come down here, we'll see IIS Express. Now, just as a side note here, you can turn Windows features on or off here. And this is where you can install IIS itself, Internet Information Services. I already have it installed, but this is where you would install that. So IIS Express is a little different than IIS, but just note that there are two options here. Now, let's zoom back in here, right click on your installation, and notice we have repair. So let's try a repair. We're going to get a command prompt up, or a UAC dialog that pops up that says, hey, do you want to do that? I'm going to say yes. And it seems to do something. I'm not sure what. Okay, but we're going to try that and just see if it has in fact done anything. So let's run IIS Express again, and it does not. Now we can again look at our event viewer. So event viewer right here. By the way, that little menu right there that I'm bringing up, this menu right here, this is by hitting the Windows key and X at the same time. That brings up this menu, really handy little menu that's built into Windows 10. It allows us to get to some pretty quick things: Task Manager, File Explorer, Search Run, Shutdown. I use this all the time where I hit WinX and then I hit U, which opens up this menu, and then I hit S for sleep, or you can do U for shutdown, R for restart, and so on. So just note that that's there. I use it all the time. Then here we can go back to our Windows logs, applications, look at the latest IIS Express error, and it's still saying failed to initialize the HTTP SYS communication. It's considered ill by the W3 SVC and terminated. So that's the problem. That's our error. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to now reach out for help. But notice all the steps I did before we start the process of reaching out for help. I made sure that it wasn't Visual Studio. I double checked that. I double checked it wasn't my project. I cleaned up my project just in case. I used a different version of Visual Studio. I made sure Visual Studio was on the latest edition, because that may have updated or changed or tweaked IIS Express. And then I also made sure I repaired Visual Studio just in case. And then after all that's done, after I've done all this testing, I've made sure the problem isn't in one installation of Visual Studio. It's not in my one project type. I've tried different things and it still doesn't work. Now is when I go ask for help. So I'm going to take this error message here. It seems like it's more information. I'm going to copy that and I'll open up Notepad. I'll paste it in here. And the only thing I might do is if this name right here is sensitive. Now, since I used a test project to verify that the issue still happened, I can use this message just as it is. But if this were a sensitive project name, then you would delete that information out and just put stars in its place, something like that. Or, project name like that in angle brackets, something to indicate that you took information out and replaced it with sanitized information. Just making sure that you're not giving away anything sensitive. But this information is pretty clear. The process ID, which won't be really helpful, but at least you have information about the app pool. It failed to initialize. HTTP.sys is the problem with communication. It's considered ill by the W3 SVC process and it's been terminated. And then don't forget that error number. So we would come over here, get the detail, and we'd grab the error number that is right here. So I would say that the error number is that 020000780. So now I have that information. I would then minimize this and I would again run this so I get the exact wording here. Now here's a little trick. You can hit Control-C to copy that dialog box and paste it in, and it didn't work. Awesome. It works on most dialog boxes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type word for word. I'm not going to skip words. I'm not going to correct grammar. I'm going to say unable to connect to web server, single quote, IIS Express. Like that. That is the error message, like so, and I'll put that in quotes. So that way we get the exact error message, not a close error message, not it said it couldn't connect. That's not the exact error message. And the reason why it's so important to get the exact error message is because that greatly increases the chances someone can Google the results or can look through manuals for the results or can look through source code and get the results. So all of those allow us to get the information we need based upon the exact wording. So make sure that wording is correct. Now that I have these three pieces of information, I'm going to work up a question that I can ask people. I'm going to say, okay, I have a brief summary at the beginning. My IIS Express is not launching and it's saying that it has failed to start. And then I'm going to include, I'm going to say, here is the event log info, like so. And then this is the error message I get in Visual Studio, like so. And then I'd probably take off this extra, now extraneous error message. So I would summarize up here like this. I'd say my IIS Express is failing to launch. Maybe that's it. My IIS Express is failing to launch. And then down here is what I tried. And I'd start listing things. Okay, so I tried a different version of Visual Studio. I tried updating Visual Studio to the latest version. I tried repairing Visual Studio. I tried a different project type or different project installation. Then I tried repairing IS Express itself. And I go through a list of all the things that I've tried. That way people know that I have made the effort and they don't then suggest the things that I've already done. Now, the one thing that I haven't done yet that I'm going to do before I turn this in is I have not yet installed the latest Windows updates. And that's kind of a big oversight, it seems like, because Windows updates can affect Windows. However, my Windows updates currently have some sort of problem where they won't install. I've got to do a repair or remove the update and try it again, which may be the issue. But I wanted to not fix that just in case it did fix this problem. But I wanted to show you this process of how I go through this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information, and if the Windows update thing, when I get that cleared up, if that doesn't solve the problem, and it still has the same issue, then I'm going to take this information and I'm going to reach out to people that might be able to help me. Now, this is probably going to be going here. Let's close this out. And this little icon right up here, we have send feedback. Click send feedback, report a problem. Wait for it. It's going to launch a new window. And it says, okay, you have a problem. Start typing out your problem. You can fill out the description, which I already have information to put here. How it impacts you. I'm unable to use this version. More difficult or complex to do my work. That's probably the one that's my issue here, because you can use Kestrel, which is not IS Express. It's the other one. But that can be a pain. So it's more difficult to complete my work, but it's not unusable. Okay. So that's what I'd probably choose. And I'm not sure if it started after I upgraded the new version. So I'm going to leave it alone. I would include the screenshot of that error. I would probably record my actions to reproduce the issue just in case that helps. And then I would submit the issue. Okay. That process is invaluable because by walking through the steps and doing this process, you will give Microsoft the ability to diagnose the issue. But you need to do your homework first. I have had a number of people have told me, Tim, this process does not work. They just close my issue. Well, the big reason why they close issues is because people haven't first searched to make sure that the issue isn't already listed somewhere. And that's something I'll be doing before I go any further, is I will search to make sure that there's not already an issue somewhere in here that's about IS Express. And if there's one that's close, but it's not my issue, I'll even reference that and say, I found this issue, but it's not like mine because of X, Y, and Z. That way they know that you've done your homework. So do your homework first. Then make sure that you list all the things that you've tried already. That shows that you've put forth the effort to diagnose the issue to try and resolve it on your own. Otherwise, they may start with something like, did you restart Visual Studio? Did you restart your computer? And you may say, Tim, that's so annoying. They ask me those basic questions. That's because you didn't give them the information up front that said, here's the things I did, and include those steps. Because if they know that, they can go, okay, I can skip these first 13 simple diagnostic fixes and then look at this as a real issue. Okay, so if it's not like other issues, or if you differentiate why it's not, if you are clear on what the issue is, make sure that title is very, very clear and identifies exactly what the issue is, and make sure you don't lump in other issues. So if you say, yeah, and it's also kind of slow in Visual Studio right now. Well, no, don't include that, okay? Focus on the issue you're having right now. If you have a separate issue, open a separate ticket, Okay, keep it to one issue. Now, by doing that, you'll have a much higher chance of getting your issue seen and actually evaluated by a human. And that's the thing you want to do, is get evaluated by a human that actually can make a decision on this, not just a level 1 person who's just making sure that you've filled out all the information properly. They're going to look at it and you're going to go, okay, yep, it looks like they got all the information they need. Now let's bring it before someone who knows IIS Express. And they will look at it and go, okay, I can diagnose this issue now because you've provided me the clear description of what's going on, the error logs, the screenshots of the error, and also the recording of the actions to reproduce the issue. Having all of that will allow them to see what's going on your machine, because if they can't reproduce the issue, if they're not having the issue, if they're not hearing other people having this issue, then they're going to lean towards the idea, well, we just don't know, because it's probably something on your machine. And it probably is. It probably is something on my machine, but I don't know what it is. So by giving that recording, they can look into the logs and see, oh, you know what? That looks like it might be an issue. And they're more likely to say, hey, have you happened to install something else that may be known to interfere with IIS Express? Or they may say, okay, your next step is going to be to run this script or to uninstall Visual Studio and reinstall it, and they'll give you different options. But by giving them all the information possible, you are giving them the best chance of success in doing their job in helping you. So that's the process I go through whenever I have a problem in Visual Studio. It isn't that often, but when it happens, you want to let the team know. Because if it is that update, they can roll it back or they can identify the problem and solve it in a quick patch. If it is unique to your machine, then they may be able to point you in the right direction. Just make sure you've done as much Googling beforehand as possible. Make sure you track down that error code and just see if there's any other possible options out there. Stack Overflow is a great place to look for things like that. And make sure that you have done everything in your abilities to make sure that there's not a thing that you haven't tried. Okay, so go through all the steps. Make sure that you've identified where the issue really has to be, because you've tried as much as possible to narrow down or eliminate issues. Okay, so with that, we'll leave it off here. It's kind of a cliffhanger. I'm going to fix my Windows Update issue, see if that fixes the problem. And if not, I'm going to do some more research. And then I'm going to submit this problem and probably reach out to some people as well. But from there, who knows? I'll probably let you know what happens in the future, but hopefully I get my Visual Studio back up and running with IIS Express. In the meantime, what we can do is just do this drop down here and choose Web Application 6 instead. Now, there is an issue here. If we go to close solution and let's open back up. Oh, this is the wrong version, isn't it? This is the preview version. Let's not do that. Let's open up this version of Visual Studio. We'll close the solution. We'll open up our IAmTimCorey Retail Manager again. And I have two different web projects here that I want to start both of, but I've been using IIS Express for the one because of the fact that I did have two. And by default, whenever you choose the Kestrel installation, just choosing the project name as Kestrel, it's going to launch on port 5001 for HTTPS. But if I have two of them open, they both try to open on the same port, and that causes a problem. Well, there's a solution for that. What you can do is go to your project, right click on it and go to Properties, go under Debug, and choose your profile of the project name, so Portal. And then down here, I've already changed it here, but this will say 5001 and 5000. But because I want to start on a different profile, or two different ones at the same time, I'm going to say 5002 and 5003. This will start my HTTPS version on port 5003. That will allow me not to have a conflict. Now I can open up two at the same time. Now, if you've never tried 2U4 at the same time, this is just a little bonus lesson here. Right-click on your solution and go to Set Startup Projects. And in here, you can set multiple startup projects. I'm going to choose the portal, start, the API, start. The API should start first before the portal. I'm going to hit the up button. Now the API is first in the list. Notice API, then portal. That's because I've selected API and I hit the up arrow. And then we also have the desktop UI. Let's start that as well. So there's 3 projects we're going to start. We hit OK. Now it says multiple startup. I hit start right here, and they should all launch. Okay, so I have Kestrel window. Whoops. I have a Kestrel window here. I have a Kestrel window here. And now I have the portal launching. I also have somewhere here, I have the API as well. If we open it up on port 5001, there's the API. There's the portal as well. Okay, so both are now launched, both on 2 different Kestrel windows. So we can still have our application running. That's why I say it's not a showstopper. It's just an inconvenience, because I wanted to have one use IaaS Express and one use Kestrel, but now we're going to have to use both on Kestrel just to make this work until I can get Visual Studio straightened out. So it is kind of an annoying thing, but it's not the end of the world. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got something valuable out of it. Like I said, this is all about real world practical stuff. This is the stuff you're going to face. It's not all perfect tutorials that work the first time. Sometimes stuff breaks, and it's kind of on us to fix it, or at least diagnose it in order to help somebody else fix it. And think of that from the other perspective. If you are on the Visual Studio team and someone comes to you and says, my IAS Express doesn't launch, and that's it. How hard is that to diagnose? Because you don't know what they tried. You don't know if they've been conscientious and tried all the different options. So the more information you can give them, the easier it makes their job. And the easier you make their job, probably the happier they are with you. Because if you make their life miserable trying to guess what's going on and take shots in the dark, then they're not going to be real thrilled to try and work on your ticket. But if you are as conscientious as possible, and if you give them as much information as possible to help them out, while not giving them information that's not helpful, make sure you focus it, but give them the helpful information, then they're going to have a much easier time tracking down this issue. It's going to make their life a whole lot easier. Make their life easier, make them happy, and hopefully they can fix your problem and make you happy. All right. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.